Hello, I'm Anita Hollinshead and I'm the Regional Collections Advisor for Museum Development East Midlands, and today we're going to look at safe handling of collections. It's really important that we use safe handling practices in order to sort of avoid damage to our collections, to our visitors and to our staff and volunteers. There are a whole range of ways in which we might accidentally damage collections, but if we follow good collections handling practices, we can sort of keep those to a minimum. And one of those principles is really to reduce the amount of handling we actually have to do. One of our other films is about packing collections, and we talk about how to pack collections in such a way that we generally don't need to unpack them to have a look at them. So we've got an example here of this bottle of Spirit of Sal. It's in a little box in a plastizote liner. There are pictures on the lid of what the contents are, and the lid is also clear so that we're able to look at that object without actually having to handle it. As you can see at the moment, I'm wearing a pair of nitrile gloves. We generally recommend wearing gloves for object handling with a few exceptions, and those would be particularly sort of shiny, glazed objects where we might accidentally drop them because our hands are a bit slippery wearing gloves. There's also where we're handling paper objects, we would use clean, dry hands for handling paper objects. And sometimes it's easier to handle textiles with clean, dry hands because you need those tactile properties in order to safely handle them. Generally, we'd wear a pair of nitrile gloves, and the reason we wear nitrile gloves is because they're impermeable. So the acids and the dirt in the sweat on our hands will not pass through the gloves, and the hazards potentially in the objects that we're handling and the dirt on the objects that we're handling will not pass through the gloves onto our skin. If our gloves become dirty, then we should change them. Traditionally, we would have worn white cotton gloves like these in museums. The advantage is that we can wash them in between uses, but they are permeable, so that's a problem in terms of sweat passing through them. They're also, you don't have the tactile properties, they're a bit looser in the way that they fit to the nitrile gloves. The other type of gloves I've got here are rigger gloves with a textured palm, and those are what we would use to lift heavy objects and heavy boxes, but not to handle anything delicate. The other way that I've prepared for handling objects is that I'm not wearing a lanyard or any chunky jewellery or any jewellery at all. It's very easy to scratch something if you're wearing rings, watch, belts, all those kind of things that if you're handling and moving collections you could catch them. Also things like loose sleeves can be an issue. If I was to sort of reach across all of these objects and I had a loose sort of floppy sleeve, it could catch something and break it. So it's about sort of having your clean, dry hands, your suitable gloves, and just making sure that nothing about your person is likely to cause damage. It's about sort of, again, it's about minimising risk and taking care. And I think the other thing that I always say is take your time. So whenever you're handling things, just take time to look at the object and to consider the things that might make it, vulnerable, easily broken, the weak areas. And also to always know if you're moving something, always have your landing area clear and your route, your journey clear as well. So it's all about planning and taking time, and that can really minimise risks. So before we handle an object, we're going to have a look at them and have a think really about areas of weakness. So I'm just going to have a look at a few different objects with you and think about where they might be particularly vulnerable. So before you pick up an object, just take your time to assess it and have a good look. So what we've got here is a teapot. Now we've got a handle, we've got a loose lid, and we've got a spout. So the handle and the spout are potentially areas of weakness, and the lid could fall off when we pick it up. So what we would always do is take the lid off and carry it separately. And we never pick objects up by the handle because that can definitely be an area of weakness. So we would pick it up underneath and support it on the side if we were lifting it. Now you might also notice that there's some chips around the inside rim there. So we're looking for signs of damage. You could cut yourself on that, so just being very cautious. So also we've got this Jubilee mug from Melton Mowbray in 1887, Victorian mug, and if you have a look, I'm supporting it underneath and at the side, not by the handle, what we've got here. If you look again, there are chips around that edge, and the glaze is quite badly damaged, so if you were careless you could cause more of that to come off, and you could also cut yourself. So again, supporting it underneath and at the side. Now we've also got a couple of photographs, and we know that the gelatin on the surface of photographs can be easily damaged by being in contact with fingerprints. So we always wear gloves when handling photographs. And actually what we've got here is that they're in an archival polyester pocket, so much safer for handling this photograph because it's in an enclosure. And again, we've got the same here. So if you can pack your archival materials and your photographs into these polyester enclosures, it does make them much safer to handle. So the other thing that you might want to do is to use your magnifying glass. This is an illuminated magnifying glass. When you're checking the condition of objects, you might want to actually look through the magnifying glass, and you'll get a much clearer view of the condition of the surface of an object. So you can have your illuminated one, or I've also got this little hand lens as well, which is really useful. You kind of put it close to your eye and then look at the object. So what I've got here is a ceremonial spade. The handle is quite decorative, beautifully sort of made, wooden handle, and then the blade is metal. So I'm wearing gloves again to handle that, because we always wear gloves when handling metals. The sweat and oils on our skin can cause corrosion on the surface of metals, and you often see those sort of imprints, those fingerprint patterns on the surface of metal objects, which are very difficult to remove. So I'm sort of supporting the blade with one hand and I'm supporting the handle with the other. I'm just going to put that back in the box now. So moving on, one of the other things to look at when we're studying our objects before we pick them up is evidence of pest activity. And I've got this dairy ladle here, and if you can see in the bottom there are holes, signs that this has had an infestation of woodworm in the past. Now those holes look quite sort of dark and they look quite old, and there isn't a lot of frass, sort of dust, powdery dust that is insect droppings. So I think we can probably assume that this is old insect pest damage. But it's very important to monitor that situation. And also we've got our little blackbird here. So I'm holding him by the base, the strongest part. I'm not handling the actual body of the bird. But fur and feathers, again, are particularly attractive to insect pests. So we need to be particularly vigilant when we're looking at objects made from fur or feathers or wool or silk, paper, and dried plant material. They're all things that can be very attractive to insect pests, and they will eat them. For further information about insect pests, we've got the new Insect Pests in Historic Houses and Museums, which you can get for free. And we've also got Pests in Houses Great and Small, which is by Dee Lauder and David Pinniger. It's recommended on the back of the poster, and it's a really sort of good, comprehensive but very straightforward guide to help you with pest management. So just again, to be cautious when approaching your collections and being aware of potential hazards that might be present. So here we've got an in memoriam card from 1861. And there are a number of things that we can look at here. This is a framed object, so there's glass, there's board, there's paper, and there's a wooden and gilded frame. The gilding is actually underneath the glass, but if you are handling gilded objects, then treat them like metal and always wear gloves. All of these materials, paper and wood, are susceptible to attack by insect pests, so make sure that you have a good look at the condition of them as you're handling them. And then just to show you how you should hold a frame when you pick it up. So Always support it underneath and at the side, and that's the frame of any size. If it's a really large framed work, then you're probably going to need 2 or more people to pick it up safely. But make sure you always support a framed object underneath, because if you pick it up by the top and there's a weakness in the frame, everything will sort of collapse and fall out of the bottom and the glass will break. So always hold your pictures like this. I'm just going to talk about paper objects and how to handle them safely. And as you can see, I've now got clean, dry hands and not wearing gloves so that I can pick them up and have those sort of tactile properties of my fingertips. But all of these paper artifacts at the front here, the photographs and the documents, they're all inside these archival polyester Melanex sleeves, so they can be safely handled without us having to worry about damaging them from our fingertips. What if we want to move a paper object? What's the best way to do that? So what I've got here is I've got a piece of acid-free foam board, and we've rested this meter card onto that piece of acid-free board. It's well supported. I can carry it about like this, and it's very well supported. But if I want to turn it over, the best thing to do is then put another sheet of the acid-free foam board on top, and then turn it over like that, lift that off, and there we are. It's the other way up, and I've done that without putting any strain on the object, because as you can see, there's quite a bit of damage on that, and also possibly some evidence that something like silverfish has been grazing on the surface of the paper as well, that you can see here. So that's how we turn the object over. Put another sheet of board on top, turn it over, and turn it like that. So I've got a goldfish bowl here, a glass goldfish bowl, and I've got this to demonstrate times when it's more appropriate not to wear gloves. This is quite a shiny object. It's quite smooth and quite slippery, and if I was wearing gloves I could easily drop it. So I would support it underneath and at the side, and I would pick it up, but with clean, dry hands, not wearing gloves. If we've got to move and lift a fragile object, it's much better to support it and carry it like this. So I've got it in a box lid, in a nest of acid-free tissue. What we've got here is an amber necklace. It's very delicate, and the strings that it's threaded onto are very fragile. So I've placed it in that acid-free tissue nest and the lid, and I can safely carry it around like this without putting any pressure on the object itself. So this is a great method for lifting up vulnerable, fragile objects. If you've got a ceramic that's been badly repaired, and if you pick it up by hand, it might easily sort of collapse. Anything like that, this is a really good method of doing that. So to summarise, always lift objects by the strongest part and not by anything like a spout or a handle. Use both hands, lift from underneath and support at the side. And if there are any loose parts like a lid, remove that and carry it separately. So the correct way to carry this would be like that, being aware not to catch the spout on anything. With a delicate object, use a nest of tissue paper and a lid. Be aware of any hazards that might be present and whether you need there to be 2 people if you've got quite a heavy object to move. And use trays and trolleys and lifting equipment as needed.